Welcome to The Conversation. My name is Shannon Taylor. I'm the Executive Director of Blacks and Jews in Conversation. We have with us Dr. Frank, who is not only on a winning team in the Super Bowl twice, but he is a doctor for hair, a hair specialist, and this one is going to beat everybody, an otolaryngologist. He is an ENT, ear, nose, and throat doctor. In our long series of specialized medical practitioners, we now have two in price of one, plus a football hero. And I'm going to turn it over to him to tell you about his multifaceted career. He came from a favorite city of mine, Pittsburgh, and of course my roommate from law school, Phil Herbert, came from Butler, where they had all the zombie movies originate, and those wonderful graveyards over there. And he went to Ohio State, and he had a degree in chemistry. That helps with football, because every time you get injured, you need to know a little bit about the chemistry. And he went on to be drafted. That's not the kind of draft that the rest of us kind of run away from. This is the professional draft. This is the draft that means that you're going into the high and mighty firms, where you're going into a Wall Street firm so it can collapse later like Lehman's. You're going into a draft for the NFL. You are a high prize. And he was drafted in 1984. And he has spent 5 years and 2 Super Bowls, and he still lives to talk about it. And he went on to have his residency, was board certified, and he practiced in Chicago. They had the fire. In San Francisco, they had the earthquakes. And so he ends up here in New York, to our good fortune, where so far all we have is bad weather. And he's attending at St. Luke's Roosevelt, where I've spent many a month myself. And he is the founder of the Annapelli Hair Clinic. And the number for that is 751-HAIR, just like the show. And with that, I'm turning it over to the good doctor. And first, we're going to get into the salient question: how do you go from the winning glory days of the Super Bowl, where you have more people in the whole world watching and cheering you than at any other activity, to being a doctor where you have more people cursing you than any other activity? Doctor, take it away.
Shannon, we're going right into it. You said everything. You said it all. But the question is, how do you go from being in the Super Bowl? I was first in Super Bowl 19, and then I played in Super Bowl 23. I was a tight end. Maybe you've heard of some of the players on the team. Maybe you'd have to be a sports fan to hear about Joe Montana. He was the quarterback. And then it was Steve Young. And then I left football after the Super Bowl 23. We beat the Cincinnati Bengals in the best Super Bowl and of all times. And I left to go to medical school and to become a physician, because my mother said, I want my son to be a doctor, and that's why. And then and many other reasons. So I went to medical school. I studied very hard. I was doing research when I was an undergraduate. I was learning. I was studying. And my football friends thought I was crazy. They said, wait a minute, you're a starting tight end in the National Football League, and you're going to do what? You're going to be a doctor? And I said, that's what I want to do. You guys can play football and support you, but in 5 or 10 years, I don't think I'm going to be interested in football as much as you are. I would rather be a professional. And so I went to medical school and became a surgeon.
Now, as a star football player, did you have your share of injuries or watching injuries?
Very good question. Every football player has to play with pain. You're injured on almost every game, if not seriously, and it's a fear of every football player. It's like going to battle. And I had a friend who was played longer than me in the NFL, and he said, my goodness, anybody can play in and any of us can play fairly well in the NFL, but the ones who can play with an injury, those are the ones who are really admirable. So I had my fair share of injuries. Thankfully, I didn't have any real serious finger or hand or shoulder or elbow injury. I had a small elbow injury, but I never really had a knee injury. I had other small injuries, but I'm very accustomed to that. And fortunately now that I'm out of football and I'm older and I'm a doctor, I don't have to have my own injuries anymore.
Having been injured, having seen injuries, does that make you more compassionate as a doctor to all the injured people who come before you?
I was already very compassionate. I was very compassionate when I was young. I was very compassionate when I was playing in the NFL, and I'm very compassionate now. I'm compassionate for somebody who has a physical problem, for somebody who has an emotional problem, a psychological problem, any sort of problem. And that's what got me into people with having hair issues. It's a very troubling thing for people. I'm very, very sensitive to that.
Bear with me. Bear with me, because...
I'm not going to let you get too far, Shannon.
All right. Most doctors today, and not necessarily the ones that are subjected to me, but most doctors today, they do not want to spend too much time with a patient. They have insurance or HMOs that are not going to give them much leeway or allow them to. Certainly in the hospitals, you're not going to get much care. They don't much care about the patients. But as a football star, you're crashing into people, you're smashing into people, you're pounding into people, and you're going from that to the exact opposite. That's the contrast that I see, and that's what I want to have you more delve into.
Well, let's start out with what's the most important thing. When you go to a doctor or you go to a clinic and you have an illness or an injury or a complaint, that doctor should be listening to you. He should be sitting. He should be paying attention. He should be genuinely concerned. He should not be in a rush. How often does that happen? Very, very rarely. So every doctor should pride himself or herself on spending time with individuals, being compassionate, and listening, because it just doesn't happen anymore. Now, was I that way when I was playing football? It was another realm. Yes, it was entirely different. And so, personally, I had to switch the light, put on the cleats, put on the shoulder pads, put on the helmet, and play the game. And I did it, and I did it very well. But believe me, I was very glad at the end of my career when I no longer had to put up that sort of persona and block out all of the pain and all of the trauma and all of the violence of football. It's behind me, and I'm grateful for that. I'm glad I had those years. Now I get to do what's fun. It's pleasurable. Anybody, if they get to help somebody or do something for somebody, it's hard when you first start trying to do it, but then at the end, it's always a pleasure, and it's always rewarding, and I get to do that.
Now, the 49ers, the team on which you were in Frisco, is, of course, named after the gold diggers of 49, the Sutter's Mill, the Calamity Janes, all the impoverished, greedy people storming through the avalanches, running to California to try and eke out any kind of living that they could get from those who had already struggled through the Klondike and gotten all the gold that they could already get out of California. These people were left out of luck. And why they took that name for your team, I have no idea. But I'm wondering if you have any memory of your bands, of all your marching bands that played their hearts out for all your Super Bowls and all the games that you had halftimes for. Because I was a drum captain, as I've told you. And do you appreciate the cheerleaders and all the sideline people who are there rooting for all the football stars? Because after all, the subject is the football player. But I was forced into hard labor for all those years as a drum captain, and all our drummers with all our cheers and our chants and our marches and our swirls, and now you have practically a factory mill of people all over the country doing pyrotechnics for the football teams. Do the players appreciate all of the support they get?
Shannon, if you were the drum major, I would have been honored. It would have been a pleasure during the halftime to come out from the halftime and hear you playing a drum roll or what you call a riff or something. And I'm not a musician, but I would have been delighted, and it would have been an honor. But I always appreciated it. When I played football at Ohio State, we had what was called the best damn band in the land. They didn't have much of a football team last Saturday, but we had a terrific band, and there was a program that they did where they created a Script Ohio, and it was just a delightful display of musicians and entertainers marching out onto the field at halftime, and they would form the letters of the state of Ohio, and then at the end the head drum major, and it would have been you, Shannon. You would have run out and done a few pirouettes and high stepping, and had a chance to dot the I. That was Script Ohio, and they played the French song Le Régiment, and it was a wonderful event. And anybody who is a college football fan gets to see that. Script Ohio. I was delighted to be a part of that. So that's my answer to your question about the marching band. I can't play an instrument. I'm a surgeon, former football player, and but I appreciate it. I love to listen to the music. You know, that band, they used to come when we were in the end zone, or we were down in one end of the field. They used to sneak up behind us and start playing the fight song, and the drums and the tubas, and they would just get us so motivated. It was wonderful. It was a great experience.
Do you remember your colleagues? Do you see them still? Do you have reunions? Do you play football to this day?
I really enjoy when I see my roommates and my colleagues from football, my friends, Joe Montana and Steve Young and Ronnie Lott and Jerry Rice and then my friends from college and even back from high school. And we can't get together enough and reminisce and talk about the old times. So we try to do it as often as we can. It's difficult because we're all spread out, and now we all have our families and do different things, but from time to time, the San Francisco 49ers will have reunions in different cities, and we'll have a lot of fun, and we'll reminisce and get to share the old times.
I met you thanks to David Fishoff, the promoter, and Rabbi Einhorn at the Westside Institutional Temple during a sports Shabbaton, and I was curious because there were other sports people that weekend who had a hard time being Jewish in southern teams, and you did not. You found yourself very acclimatized in San Francisco. There was no, as you saw it, friction between the religions. I'd like you to talk about that.
Well, it was never as easy as you may imply to be a high school, a college, a professional football player, and to have sporting events on Saturdays and practices. And there were schools that I went to that I always had challenges, and I always was forced to make decisions. But I never let it affect who I am or what I believe in, and the person that I am deep down inside, and what my values are. So it was always challenging, and you just learn to deal with it. And fortunately, I walked away from the game when I was 27 years old, and don't have to do that. And you mentioned if there was any friction when I was playing football. I think sports is one of the purest and most free endeavors that you could ever imagine, especially as a player. It's a merit system. I used to call it a meritocracy. The best player plays, the best team wins. There was, in my opinion, there were very little shenanigans going on, and any sort of behavior that played favoritism or anti-Semitism or racism. And it's a great venue, and for African American sports, it's a wonderful venue to showcase and to build and to develop. And you don't see as many Jewish athletes, but I was one, and there were a few others in the NFL, and we had a little bond and a tight-knit group, and it was something very special.
In my day, if you didn't, in Paramus, if you didn't, New Jersey, play in the marching band, you didn't play your instrument at all. And there were a few musicians who were observant, and they didn't perform. any more music, and their music careers were cut short, whether as a hobby or a chosen profession. They were just cut short. And I didn't know too much, and so I continued ahead in the marching bands until I became a little wiser. And fortunately today, that kind of practice is not allowed. But of course, sports, like the entertainment industry, does not permit, in most instances, a person to be observant. They cut right across religion, and certainly they wipe out observant Jews left and right, with Friday and Saturday is being featured. The old story about Sandy Koufax is minor, because the next year he played on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah. He could only hold out for so long. And there's I don't know how many other holidays and how many other religions, and entertainment and sports just sweep them all aside. So let's turn to a different field. I want to get into the practice of medicine. Where you're sick, there's an excuse. Religion permits a person who's, well, most religions permit a person who's sick to go at any time for medical care. And you are the founder of a hair clinic. Now, how did that come about?
I'm the founder of Annapelli Hair Clinic. We're located on 6th Avenue and 57th Street in Manhattan, and we diagnose and we treat all types of hair loss for all different reasons. And my background as a head and neck surgeon and an ear, nose, and throat and otolaryngologist gave me a lot of experience in facial, plastic surgery, cosmetic surgery, facelifts and rhinoplasty and sinuses and ears, and doing all sorts of surgery when I was younger. But I was also learning about the scalp and about hair, and probably 10 or 12 years ago when I first started doing surgery on the scalp and hair, I didn't really understand the significance that people's hair played in their lives. And I chuckle a little bit because I think that's relatively normal, but many people who have hair loss either don't cope with it well or don't deal with it, and for years there wasn't really any great solutions. But now, through technology and surgeries and non-surgical treatments and instrumentation and being able to see deep down into the follicle and all the microscopic structures of the hair and the scalp, we're making tremendous advances. We're making Super Bowl type advances in understanding the causes of hair loss. And now we're able to stop some of that, and we can stop hair loss and get some regrowth. And so I started researching this, and I've actively been a hair surgeon, and I'm interested in all of the different things that go into causing hair loss, the natural things. Maybe it's part of your digestive system and you're not absorbing the nutrients, and some women may be anemic or have problems with their hormones. Young men have some hormone issues. There can be some genetic problems. There can be some nervous habits, some things in pollution in the air, the styling, many things. Unfortunately, it's not really addressed by most dermatologists. In fact, very few dermatologists look closely at the hair. They don't really study it. A few do, but it's very rare and few and far between. And so I learned that the hair surgeons didn't really understand hair as well as maybe they could. So for the last several years, I've been studying that and have opened up a hair clinic. And we're in New York, and we're helping a lot of people. The feedback we're getting and the results we're getting, it's just remarkable. It just makes it so interesting.
Now here I know a little bit more than football. I played music for football games, so I don't know how, but 24 years, and I know not too much except First and 10, Do It Again, and a million other cadences. But for hair loss, I know that there are chemicals that you can apply to the hair on a regular basis every day, and there's also a kind of a roller that you can roll needles through your scalp that are very small, and at the same time there used to be all these mendicants who used to have these kits with 20,000 different things you had to do for your hair that were disproved. Now, are the chemicals and rollers of today far different than what we had before? Have the advances in technology really made that much of a difference, or are we still dealing with the quackery?
Yeah. What a great question. Unfortunately, there has been so much of that surrounding hair loss for the last forever. It seems like there's been a tremendous questionable treatments and therapies, but we are making a lot of progress. It all probably started in the 50s and 60s when we learned how to actively transplant hair, but unfortunately the results in the 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, you could move hair and you could grow hair where you hadn't grown hair before, but it were these thick plugs and these doll hair, and it looked like the tines of a comb, and it just didn't look good. So in the late 90s and the beginning part of 2000, 2001, we really started to refine the surgical procedures for hair loss. And what happens when you make some improvements and you really evolve surgically, then everything else follows. And so the scientists, myself included, started to really look deeply into the root of the problem, no pun intended. And we could really look at the follicle with microscopic technology today. We can really get a sense for what's going on at the minute organelle level of the scalp. And in combination with that, there's been tremendous interest in cosmetic surgery. And 25 years ago or 40 years ago, it was unheard of or unthinkable to imagine what could be done cosmetically and through plastic surgery. But now there's so much attention, and people can see the results and the improvement in anesthesia and in recovery. All these things opened up many vistas and doors. So along with that, like I was saying, the researchers, now we're starting to learn about all of the other causes of hair loss. There are a few FDA-approved treatments for hair loss, but now we're learning about other things that are natural and less damaging and less toxic to your body. And it may be just a matter of solving a nervous habit, or it may be just a matter of balancing the scalp. And not to get too technical, there's plenty of things and inflammation that can exacerbate or make your scalp and hair problems worse. So this is a wide open field. It's an area I have an intense desire to understand more. And fortunately, we've had such wonderful results and have helped so many people and turned people's lives around that I'm going to continue doing it. And yeah, there will still always be people on the fringes who are just trying to make a quick buck. But that's true of any field. And it certainly can be out there. But that's not what we're interested in. This is really looking at individuals deeply and personally and learning all about their hair and their scalp and anything else that's causing some problems medically, because our bodies, it's all related. And you mentioned earlier in the program, you mentioned about the frustration of going to a doctor and not getting enough time, and the doctor's in a hurry. I mean, can you imagine if you had a high blood pressure problem or a cholesterol problem, or you had diabetes, and let's just say you had some hair problems at the same time, and maybe you were anemic, or you had some problems with your iron, and you told your doctor you were having problems with your hair and you wanted to improve how you looked. I think while he was listening to your lungs and your heart, he may not really take it seriously that you wanted to change your appearance. And I'm trying to dispel that and really taking that very, very seriously, because there are things that can be done. If you can improve how you look, you can feel better about yourself, you can certainly be more productive, you can just be a more integral person, and it opens up so many doors for people. And so that there's a lot that can be done, and there will certainly be a lot more advances over the next few years.
Now we're talking about men, because women are not losing their hair, right? Women keep their hair.
Oh, my goodness.
Women's hair flowing and flowing like Medusa and the Amazonians.
Oh, God willing. Yes, and for a man to lose his hair, he can be distraught and disappointed and concerned and excited about it. But there's also the jokes that go along with for a man losing his hair. And men have adapted pretty well to hair loss. Some haven't, but many have. Women, it can be devastating, much more devastating for a young gal who associates her her femininity and her beauty with her hair.
How does a woman lose hair?
It happens all the time, Shannon, and it can be temporary. And there's so many different ways women can.
I'm not talking about stress. I'm not talking about a woman that thinks they're losing. How does a woman really start losing her hair permanently?
My goodness. First of all, not to diminish, stress can cause what initially is a temporary hair loss. Technically, it's called an effluvium, but don't worry about that. It can be an acute event, but if the stress continues and it continues, then this event can be a chronic event, and over years, she can have chronic hair loss. That's just the beginning. Through pregnancy, through menopause, the hormones change. If a woman is much more commonly than men, women have thyroid problems. Women through their menstrual cycle can have excessive bleeding and become anemic. You can have digestive and circulation problems, which can eventually lead to the hair, nutrition problems, malabsorption problems. It goes on and on. These are things that you may read about in one small chapter of one esoteric dermatology textbook that nobody has taken seriously. And it's unfortunate because it can really affect a woman's self-esteem. And there are things that can be done. If we can learn what the cause is, we can go after it, we can attack it, and we can affect change.
I was taught from early on that you can't change your hair, that you're born with genetic propensities, that this parent or that grandparent and so on. How true is that?
There is truth to genetic propensities for hair loss. However, there's no pure, we have yet to locate the gene for hair loss. And many times you'll see children or siblings or parents or grandchildren that don't have the same hair as their parents. Many times you do, but many times you don't. So it skips generations, it moves around. Genetically, it's multifactorial, and there can be some decreased penetrance, part in the medical jargon. But what that means is, yes, part of it is genetic and inherited, but many, many things aren't genetic and inherited. Can you imagine if your parents and your grandparents have a great head of hair, and there's no baldness in your family, and all of a sudden you start to experience some patchy hair loss or some thinning, and you're wondering why?
You're not that kid. You're obviously something got messed up there.
You're not that kid.
Now you have the Anapelli Hair Clinic. It's located where in Manhattan, and how come that name? And we have 5 seconds, and I thank you very much for coming on.
751 Hair.
And I hope to see you again. And don't play football with the heads when they come into the room. And I wish you great success and for the future.
Wow, Shannon. What time?